Through tears, loved ones spoke out in court about their pain and anger over the killing of 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson in her Tamarack home. Dozens of them packed the courtroom Monday wearing bright pink and black shirts with Kayla's photo and messages of the justice they waited 3 years for.
For the rest of your existence, you will have to look in the mirror every day, regret your decisions, and think about how foolish you are. I hope all your nights are filled with regret and loneliness.
A judge sentenced 31-year-old Sakiyna Thompson to life in prison for the murder. A jury found her guilty in October. 10 of Kayla Hodgson's friends and family stood firm as they faced her killer for the last time.
What she's done was very wicked and evil, and a person like her, it's important that they never see the light of day again.
Evidence showed Thompson confronted Hodgson in her apartment home in July of 2022 at 5 o'clock in the morning and then stabbed her to death. Thompson testified during trial that it was self-defense because she was pregnant at the time, but the jury didn't believe her.
Or how about the audacity of you to come up on this stand and waste taxpayer dollars and tell them a crock of garbage to everyone in the courtroom about your blackout reasoning?
Prosecutors say Thompson killed Kayla because Kayla was dating her boyfriend.
It is just past 1 p.m. on July 13th, 2022. The humidity is rising off the pavement at the Tamarack Village Apartments in Florida. A car pulls up to the curb. It's a rideshare. The passenger in the back seat steps out. She isn't a local. She isn't here for the beaches, and she isn't here for the nightlife. She isn't even carrying a suitcase. She has just traveled 1,100 miles from Queens, New York, to stand on this specific patch of concrete. If you looked at the rideshare driver's app, you wouldn't find her name. You wouldn't see Sakiyna Thompson. She made sure of that. She used a fake profile to book the ride because she didn't want anyone to know she was in the state. Years later, she would stand in a courtroom and tell a jury that she flew all this way just to talk, that she came for closure. But you don't use a fake identity to have a conversation. You don't fly across the country with empty hands just to clear the air. The electronic footprint she tried to scrub clean reveals the truth. This wasn't a spontaneous visit. It was a calculated one-way trip designed to end a rivalry permanently. Welcome back to Real True Crime 24/7. Today, we are opening the file on Kayla Hodgson. This is a case defined by jealousy, digital stalking, and a courtroom defense that fell apart just 2 weeks ago. But before we examine the evidence, I want to take a second for you, the person watching this right now. We cover difficult stories here, so I pray that wherever you are, you and your family stay safe, stay healthy, and are protected from harm. Please remember, while a verdict has officially been rendered in this case, we are reviewing the facts as presented in court. Let's get into it. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She worked as a bartender, but that job title doesn't really explain who she was to the people around her. Her friends didn't just call her fun. They called her everybody's hype man. She was the person who lifted you up when you were down. She brought the energy. In the service industry, you meet hundreds of people. Some bartenders treat it like just a job. Pour the drinks, take the money, move on. But Kayla wasn't built that way. She remembered your name. She remembered what you ordered last time. She made you feel like you mattered. Her friend Brianna would later tell investigators that Kayla had this way of making every day feel like a celebration. She was bright. She was beautiful, Brianna said. But more than that, she made you feel bright and beautiful too. Kayla wasn't just surviving in Tamarack. She was thriving. She had goals. She talked about opening her own place one day, somewhere people could come and feel welcome. She wanted to create spaces where people felt seen. She was close with her mother, Diana. They spoke almost every day. Diana describes her daughter as the light of the family, someone who brought warmth into every room she entered. She had her whole life ahead of her. But that life ended on a hot afternoon inside her own apartment. When police arrived, they found a scene of absolute chaos. Kayla had suffered dozens of sharp force injuries. The woman standing on the other side of that violence was 31-year-old Sakiyna Thompson. When Sakiyna eventually stood trial, she didn't deny being there. She didn't deny holding the weapon. Instead, she told the court she was the victim. She claimed she was fighting for two lives that day, her own and her unborn child's. Her defense team called it survival. They said Kayla started it, but the evidence tells a different story. In this video, we are going to look at the facts that destroyed that defense. We will examine the specific cleaning supplies Sakiyna used to try and wash away the truth. And you will hear the chilling testimony she gave to a silent courtroom about what it felt like walking in the blood. Kayla Hodgson was building a life for herself in Tamarack. She worked in the service industry, a job that requires you to be on your feet and on your game. But for Kayla, that energy wasn't an act. Her friend Brianna described her simply, she was bright, she was beautiful. Kayla was the person you called when you needed a boost. She was the hype man of her social circle. If her friends were winning, Kayla made sure they felt like champions. She was vibrant, she was young, and she was focused on her future. She was also dating a man named Revelto Robinson. For Kayla, this relationship was just one part of her life. She wasn't looking for trouble. She had her own friends, her own ambitions. Robinson was part of her world, but he wasn't the whole world. But then something strange started happening. Kayla began noticing activity on her social media. Someone was watching her. Someone was going through her posts, her photos, her check-ins. It was Sakiyna Thompson, Robinson's ex-girlfriend from New York. In fact, when she realized that Robinson's ex-girlfriend was watching her online, Kayla didn't engage. She didn't send angry messages. She didn't try to start a fight. She just hit block. She chose peace. Her mother, Diana, saw Kayla as a source of light for the family. They had no reason to believe that a simple relationship would bring danger to their doorstep. But 1,000 miles away, in Queens, New York, that block button didn't end the conflict. It ignited it. Sakiyna Thompson was 31 years old. She had a history with Revelto Robinson. But in her mind, it wasn't history. She believed they were still together. She believed Kayla was the one interfering. When Kayla blocked her on social media, Sakiyna lost her window. She could no longer see what was happening in Florida. The screen went dark. But instead of moving on, Sakiyna became fixated. The silence didn't make her lose interest. It made her obsessive. For most people, a block is a clear message. The conversation is over. But for Sakiyna, it was just the beginning. Then, the stakes changed completely. Sakiyna discovered she was pregnant. She viewed this child as a permanent bond between her and Robinson. In her eyes, there was no room for anyone else. The pregnancy wasn't just a biological fact to her. It was proof that she and Robinson were meant to be together. The digital wall Kayla had built wasn't enough to keep Sakiyna out. Sakiyna decided that watching from a distance was over. She needed to close the gap between New York and Florida. She was done looking at screens. She wanted to see Kayla face to face. It is July 2022. Sakiyna stops looking at old photos. She starts looking at flight schedules. She isn't planning a vacation. She isn't planning a family visit. She is building a strategy to get to Florida without leaving a trail. This is where the case turns from jealousy into calculation. Sakiyna knows that if she travels under her own name, she leaves a digital footprint. She needs to move through the city without being seen. Think about what's required to travel anonymously in 2022. Your credit card transactions get logged. Your phone's GPS tracks your location. Your airline tickets are tied to your identity. Everything leaves a trace. So she sets up a fake profile on a rideshare app. She uses a false identity. She wants to be a ghost. She boards a plane from New York to Fort Lauderdale. She leaves her life in Queens behind for 24 hours. She has one objective. On July 13th, she lands in Florida. She activates the fake account. A car picks her up and takes her directly to the Tamarack Village apartments. She doesn't hesitate. She knows exactly where she is going. This isn't someone asking for an address. This is someone who has done their research. Inside the apartment, Kayla is home. It's the middle of the afternoon. This is her sanctuary. She isn't expecting guests, and she certainly isn't expecting Sakiyna. Sakiyna arrives at the door. Later, police would find no signs of forced entry. No broken locks. No shattered windows. The interaction likely begins with a simple knock. Or maybe the door was unlocked. Sakiyna steps inside. The digital stalking is over. The two women are now in the same room for the very first time. According to Sakiyna's later testimony, she went there to talk woman to woman. She told the court she just wanted clarity. She wanted to explain that she was pregnant. She wanted Kayla to understand that this wasn't just about a relationship, it was about a family. However, the conversation did not last long. Sakiyna claimed that Kayla was the one who attacked first. She said Kayla grabbed a hookah stem and slashed her across the stomach with a piece of glass. Sakiyna told the jury, "I didn't just fight for me, I fought for me and my baby." However, the forensic evidence tells a much different story. Kayla didn't just have defensive wounds. She suffered dozens of stab injuries. The medical examiner counted more than 30 distinct wounds. Defensive wounds are what you see when someone is trying to protect themselves. Cuts on the hands and forearms from trying to block a blade. Kayla had some defensive wounds. But the overwhelming majority of her injuries were not defensive. They were the result of a sustained, brutal attack. The attack was overwhelming. The medical examiner's report suggests this wasn't a fight between two equals. It was a slaughter. When asked about the most violent moments, Sakiyna simply said she blacked out. She claimed her memory of the actual killing was gone, but her memory of what happened after was clear enough. The apartment fell silent. Sakiyna stood in the living room. She later described the scene with a chilling phrase, "I was walking in the blood." She didn't call 911. She didn't check for a pulse. Instead, she went to the kitchen. She found Lysol wipes and paper towels. She got on her hands and knees and tried to scrub Kayla's blood off the floor. This isn't what a traumatized victim does. This is what someone does when they are trying to hide a crime. She scrubbed the floors. She wiped down surfaces. But blood is difficult to clean completely. It seeps into cracks. It leaves traces that even Lysol wipes can't remove. Then, she realized her own clothes were soaked. She walked into Kayla's bedroom, opened the closet, and put on the victim's clothes. She left her own bloody garments behind. Think about the psychological coldness of that act. Kayla's body is still in the next room. And Sakiyna is going through her closet, picking out an outfit. She walked out the front door, got into a vehicle, and headed straight for the airport. She was back in New York before the sun went down. When Kayla's body was found, the Tamarack community was shaken. Neighbors like Frederick Thomas were heartbroken, telling reporters, "It's a life cut short." But the detectives noticed something immediately. There was no forced entry. No kicked-in door. This usually means the victim knew their attacker. Police began pulling digital records. They didn't look for fingerprints on the door. They looked for fingerprints on the network. In 2022, almost everything leaves a digital trace. They found the rideshare data, they traced the IP addresses, and they found the crack in Sakiyna's plan. The fake profile she used to travel anonymously led right back to her real identity in Queens. A rideshare trip had been booked under a fake name from Fort Lauderdale Airport to Tamarack Village Apartments on July 13th. But when investigators dug deeper, the account had been created using a phone number that traced back to Sakiyna Thompson. She thought using a fake profile would make her invisible, but she had made a critical mistake. She used her real phone number to verify the account. The investigators also pulled flight manifests. They found Sakiyna's name on a flight from New York to Fort Lauderdale on July 13th, and they found her on a return flight to New York that same evening. The forensic team processed Kayla's apartment. They found the bloody clothes Sakiyna had left behind. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kayla, and the clothes had touched DNA from Sakiyna. In August 2022, a month after the murder, NYPD and Florida detectives located Sakiyna Thompson. She was arrested and extradited to Florida. It would take 3 long years for the case to reach a courtroom. The trial finally began in late 2025. The prosecution built their case on premeditation. They pointed to the fake profile, the one-way flight, and the attempt to clean the crime scene. They argued that you don't bring Lysol wipes to a self-defense situation. The prosecution's lead attorney told the jury, "You don't bring Lysol wipes to a self-defense situation. You bring them to a crime scene you're trying to cover up." They walked the jury through the digital forensics, showing how every step of Sakiyna's journey could be traced despite her attempts to travel anonymously. The defense held on to their story. It was self-defense, triggered by a fight over the hookah, and motivated by Sakiyna's instinct to protect her unborn child. But when Sakiyna took the stand, her testimony raised more questions than it answered. She couldn't explain why she needed a fake rideshare profile to have a conversation. She couldn't explain why she immediately fled the state instead of calling the police. The jury didn't buy it. In October 2025, after reviewing the travel plans and the severity of the wounds, they returned their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. On December 1, 2025, Sakiyna returned to court for sentencing. The room was heavy with tension. This was the moment Kayla's family had been waiting for. Kayla's cousin, Alicia Mitchell, stood up and addressed Sakiyna directly. She spoke about the pain of the last 3 years, but also about Sakiyna's behavior during the trial. Alicia said, "You sat here and you stared at me and my family, showing absolutely not one drop of remorse." The family noted that Sakiyna's expression never changed. Alicia told her, "Your stares showed an expression of, 'So what? Yeah, I did it and I'd do it again.'" The judge had the final word. Sakiyna Thompson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the end, 2 women's lives were destroyed over a relationship with one man, Revelto Robinson. This case serves as a brutal reminder of how easy it is to track someone and be tracked in the modern world. Sakiyna knew where Kayla lived because of social media. But the same technology that allowed Sakiyna to stalk Kayla also allowed investigators to track Sakiyna. But Kayla's legacy isn't about how she died. It's about how she lived. She is remembered as the hype man, the energy of Tamarack, and the friend who always lifted others up. Her family has justice, but they do not have Kayla. Kayla Hodgson was 23. She had decades of life ahead of her. She was a daughter, a friend, and a spark in her community. The jury rejected the self-defense claim entirely. Based on the evidence of the fake profile and the flight, do you agree with the first-degree murder verdict? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you appreciate this deep look into the facts, please subscribe and hit the bell. Rest in peace, Kayla. You are everyone's hype man. Today, we hype you up one last time. I'll see you in the next one.